Okay, okay, we are back. I think it should be better now. Can you all hear me? Okay, अभी आवाज़ आ रही है? Okay, right, right. Okay, so the point I was trying to make that primarily it would be characterized as license quota Raj because the bureaucracy would maintain a tight control over every aspect of the production process, which would happen in the which would happen in the private sector. So that is one, and the point I was trying to further explain that it was bound to be a feature of this specific model because it was following the Soviet example, and Soviet example had shown it to everyone that how bureaucratic it was and the kind of tight control that government would have over the production process. So, so that is something. That is something that is something which we have to keep in mind. Now, it was considered to be why. In fact, it was considered necessary that the planning should be centralized. So that is where what the model had envisaged that as far as the development is concerned, right? So India could be seen in terms of being divided into different sectors and divided into different regions for the purpose of implementation of policies for growth for development. So it would be better in the understanding of in the understanding of the policymakers if everything is assessed at the central level and requirements would be fulfilled considering the fact in mind that resource generation, number one, technology which would be required for the purpose of production, number two, and number three, where all different sectors and different regions can be integrated in the national development process, in the national production process. So that was possibly the thinking that made the Nehru Malanabis to opt for the centralized planning system. But this again had another demerit in terms of understanding that one size fits all thinking. So that's where again it would be understood that what would be good for one specific region or what would be good for one specific state may equally be good for another state. So in terms of bringing about uniformity in the level of development in different parts of India, this would in fact ignore that different regions may have different requirements, and considering the local level requirements, the whole development process should be undertaken, right? So that's again another limitation of this feature would be, right? Another limitation of this feature would be. So the point I'm trying to make that in order to create a balance between socialism and democracy, this would throw up a model, or this would end up in a kind of order where there would be uneven regional growth, number one. Number two, there would not be development in the field of technology, primarily because private sector would not have any incentive to invest in or to make expenditure in research and development, because it was not expecting any return, and that was primarily because government would keep a tight control as far as their activities were concerned, right? But The kind of development that the model overall had thought, that also did not happen, and possibly agriculture was the most badly affected, because what the model had thought that the government would keep control of strategic areas, right? And that is where the strategic sectors in the thinking of the policy makers under this planning system should be publicly owned, so should be under the public control. So that's where there would be a state control over the areas which would be considered to be critical for the growth of the country, for the growth of the nation. So primarily this would this is what I'm coming to, right? This is what I'm coming to. This is what I'm coming to. Okay. So a strategic sector, the point I'm trying to make, that the government would consider that capital industry, for instance, right? Capital industry, for instance, which would create heavy machinery, right? Which would create heavy machinery, should be under the public control. That should be owned by the state. That should be under state control. Because that is what would be critical for the purpose of further triggering growth in India, right? So say for instance iron and steel company, for instance, or the energy sector, for instance, right? So all these things would be considered to be strategic in a sense that they would be the very foundation, they would be the very base which would make further industrialization possible, right? The sector or the areas which primarily produce capital goods, meaning heavy machinery, heavy tools, right? So if you recall Hindustan Machine Tools, for instance, right? Different power grids companies, the Navratnas, especially the oil refineries, right? Then different iron and steel companies. All these things would be considered to be crucial and strategic in nature, because they would make further growth of industries possible, right? The further growth of industry would depend upon their growth, because they would further create heavy machinery. They would they would manufacture heavy machinery, and once this base is ready, then further production would be possible in the field of consumer goods, right? So that is why these areas were considered to be crucial and strategic in nature, right? So the industries which would be required for the purpose of generating energy, for the purpose of generating heavy machines and tools, for the purpose of creating defense infrastructure. All these things would be considered to be strategic and areas over which the state would have its complete control, right? This would be under the complete control. So these would be the public enterprises, right, under the control of the government. But again, all of us are aware that how they in fact become inefficient, and they start incurring heavy losses, and certainly there would not be development in the field of technology. So the whole process would would stagnate, right? So if one recalls sometime back, there would be, say for instance, Hindustan machines, for instance, right? And the Hindustan Machine Tools, for instance. So or say for instance, if you look at in the field of automobile sector. So automobile sector, you would have just two cars which would be manufactured. So Ambassador and Fiat. So everywhere there would be Ambassador and Fiat, which would not be so much energy efficient, and technologically also they would be far behind compared to the automobile technology which would be available elsewhere, right? So lack of incentive to the private sector, then stagnation in the field of technology, increasing bureaucratization, red tape, all these things would be, the related features of this planning process. So that is something again, that's something again, we have to keep in mind when we are trying to understand that, why the whole endeavor on the part of Nehru and Milanovic to create a model which would balance socialism with democracy, would not yield the desired results. So that would do one, meaning that industry would suffer a setback, right? Industry would not develop, at the pace and in areas which would be required or which would be desirable for the growth, right? But what the supporters of the model had argued, that once capital goods sector develops, then it would make possible the consumer goods industry to grow and develop, right? And once consumer goods industry grows and develops, then that is where demand for the agricultural products would go high. So that is where the development in industry would also give a boost to development in agricultural sector as well. So the sectors would be considered to be interdependent, right? Interdependent in a sense that first let industrial sector to develop, especially heavy industries, right? Heavy industry would again lead the development in the consumer goods industry, and once consumer goods industry starts developing, then development in the field of agriculture sector too would happen. But it did not happen, primarily because the whole model itself could not meet the level of success what the supporters of the model had argued, and there would be uneven regional development. So in certain areas, heavy industry. Am I audible? Am I clear now? Can you hear me now? That could be right. That could be. So just then just give me an alert. Then I will come back and repeat those things. It would be quite possible, right? So maybe due to internet connectivity, or maybe sometimes connection in the microphone and all. Quite possible, right? Just give me an alert, then I will come back and repeat the thing for you again, right? Okay. Am I audible now? Can you hear me? Okay, right. हाँ, तो बाकी सब लोगों को सुनाई देता है ना? हाँ, बाकी सब लोगों को भी सुनाई दे रहा है ना? See, many a times it may be a problem with it. Maybe the problem with the individual's set or individual microphone, right? So that also, please, you can check at your end. But if something you have missed out or something, I'm required to go back and repeat, then please send me an alert. I will do that immediately. Huh? Okay, right. So the growth would be uneven, right? The growth would be uneven, and the desired development would not happen, primarily because the technology would not be available. Private sector would not have any incentive because it would be under the complete license quota Raj. And of course there would be very much control in terms of the kind of profit it can make, because the whole idea was to prevent the motive of profit to be the dominant factor in economy, right? In economy. There would be a lot of control as far as export and import would be concerned, right? So at the same time, the agriculture would not develop, primarily because the kind of interlinkages that